Hi, I'm Kenneth, and this is Common Hawthorne. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Today I'm answering more questions than I believed I would get. So I'm going to jump right in. I invited people to ask me anything, and following up on something that Julie at Peekaboo Rose started, I'm going to answer them in the order in which they came. Please explain my channel name. Well, the URL, the actual username is Crataegus monogyna, which is the scientific name of the common hawthorn. And common hawthorn was taken, and I was a plant genetics major in college, and so I turned to the scientific name. But I picked common hawthorn because I love the way that hawthorns have these frothy blossoms. I first ran across hawthorns in city tree plantings where the blossoms were white with like this brilliant vermilion pink edging. But since then, I've been to the UK in the springtime, and there are just enormous hedgerows of hawthorn in bloom, and it's so beautiful. And the leaves are interesting, but they conceal these really severe thorns. And I grew up in the desert. I really like this beautiful plant that has these really wicked thorns. Favorite book from childhood, Swiss Family Robinson. Do I use other divinatory practices besides tarot? And if so, which ones? I use oracle decks along with tarot, and I've studied runes a little bit, and I have some Lenormand decks, mostly because I think they're pretty, but they've like never, like my trial readings have always been like just really awful. Didn't feel good at all. Do I have hobbies and interests outside of esoteric practices and interests? I like reading, and I have two cats whose company I enjoy. You might have heard one of them scrabbling earlier to get up on something. I like to garden, and I used to knit and crochet, although I haven't actively in quite a while. I still have hampers of yarn. And I also like music a great deal. I'm an amateur radio style DJ, and I DJ for friends in a virtual world called Second Life, and also have a monthly radio program on an internet radio station that focused called the Musical Magpie, because I have very wide-ranging tastes, that focuses on world roots and folk music. What literature genre do I enjoy, and who would be my favorite author when it comes to fictional writing? Speculative fiction. The balance between science fiction and fantasy that I read is fluid, and actually my understanding of how much science fiction is actually fantastical, even though it's kind of structured as science fiction, that has become more nuanced for me. And my favorite author is Ursula Gruber Le Guin. Someone who's curious about my life as a Quaker and how I would use my spiritual experiences from that time in a pagan witchy tarot counseling service. And the major thing is being willing to sit and wait for an answer to appear, being comfortable with silence, and also having confidence that the answer to a querent's question is within them, and that the role is to help them to uncover that, and the cards are just a tool to do that. That might point a direction, but the discernment and the answer actually lie within the querent. Do I believe in love as a healing force, and how do I live love in my daily life? Yes. When I think in big abstractions, it tends to be thinking rather than feeling mode. I like to think that I'm empathetic and that I respond out of the heart in the moment, but kind of the way I structure things is in my mind and thinking, not in my heart and feeling. What is a respectful and inclusive question to ask non-straight people about their love life? I actually don't think questions about people's love life are generally appropriate. That the only time it's appropriate to ask them is when you actually know one another well enough that the um, the actual content of the question isn't at issue because you know one another that well. My cat's name and have I always been a cat person? I actually have two cats, Madame Max and Glencora, and I will think of a prize for anyone who comes up with the source of those names, the first person to come up with the source of those names in the comments. And I've pretty much always been a cat person. I like specific dogs. I mean, you know, dogs have been bred to like adore you, and that's very charming. But I don't actually like dogs in general. I was bit as a child. Barking like completely unsettles me. But like any cat fascinates me. I'll immediately go towards a cat. Asking about Little Big, a World Fantasy novel award, World Fantasy Award winning novel by John Crowley, is do I find the descriptions in there somehow erotic? And it's Manuela at Place of Stillness who's asking this, that they seem quite straight and focused on female features. And I mean, it is. They're all apparently heterosexual with one small like thing that kind of happens as things go by. But yes, I think the language is incredibly evocative and erotic, and I've always had a massive crush on Smokey Barnable, who is one of the protagonists of Little Big. What's my favorite element? Carbon, or maybe oxygen. But having made that joke, it actually seems rather predictable that my favorite esoteric element is fire. What was the last song I listened to? Bohemian Rhapsody, as covered by Panic at the Disco. What's my sun sign? It's Leo. And both rising and moon are Cancer, I think. Have I ever gifted someone else a tarot deck, and what deck? Yes, the first edition Brady Tarot, which I gave to a very good friend of mine when I bought the second edition. What's the next thing on my to-do list with tarot? I've recently winnowed my decks into the ones I want nearby and those that I put in storage boxes. And so I want to see what happens when I'm more intentionally focused on a smaller number of decks, so that there'll be less choice involved when I reach for a deck, and so there'll be more repetition without actually like spending a month or a week using only one deck, which I have done in the past. What's something that I thought I wouldn't enjoy but tried and found out I did enjoy? Oysters. I grew up in Southern California in the desert in the 60s, and the only seafood we ate was like canned tuna, fish sticks, and sometimes my mother would order fried catfish in a restaurant. And I, eventually tried salmon and other kind of meaty, flaky fishes. But I didn't think I would like shelf, a raw oyster. But the first one I had when it was just amazing. And now especially living in Provincetown, where Wellfleet oysters are a thing from like 2 towns down. And I'll totally like eat a dozen oysters before dinner. Nail polish. Application tips or favorite brands, and I'm totally still learning. Just recently, somebody told me to start with the pinky, which is farthest away, and then move closer, which was like, oh, yes, of course. And I'm right-handed, and so I start with by polishing my right hand, so that when I'm using a hand that still has somewhat, uncured polish on it, I'm using the one with more control. So the wet nails on the right hand then apply to the left hand. And all the polishes you've seen in my videos are from I Love Nail Polish, ILNP, which is an online store. Do I have any tattoos? I do. The thorn branch on my right forearm. An editor question, what are my thoughts on the use of semicolons? I love semicolons used properly. Although at work, kind of like my niche, some people pay attention to, are there small caps in the right places instead of hard caps, or, is there an extra space? And my real thing is the proper use of commas, but I like semicolons. How many decks do I own? True confessions time. I have a spreadsheet. I have 75 tarot decks, 25 oracle decks, 5 Lenormand decks, 5 OM decks or staves, 7 rune decks or physical runes, and 15 decks that are either like affirmation or like herbal medicine cards, or what's his name? Anyway, there's a series of questions that Brian Eno made up, that there's a deck of cards about those. Which are at the top of my list? For daily use, it's the Sasarai Beto and the This Might Hurt and Pagan Otherworlds. And to shuffle and handle, Tarot de Maria Celia, which is something that I just find myself wanting to pick up and look at. I don't really know how to read Marseille yet, and but I like, it's small and I like handling them. Similarly, the Squid Cake Marseille and the Rare Triumphs by Ian Cumpsty, which is a lovely small deck. And then also La Corte dei Tarocchi, which, the sound it makes and the fact that they're a wonderful shape, it's impossible to shuffle as far as I'm concerned, even overhand. So to look at, I really love the Tarot of Delphi, which was an early extravagant purchase because it's out of print, although I've seen murmurings that it's going to come back into print. But it was a private transaction. And the Oculi Occultati, which is like really a kind of amazing piece of art. But I haven't read with it yet. I'm afraid to shuffle it because I'm not positive I would recognize every single card out of order. Let's see, where am I? Annie, I'm thinking of rehoming. Yes, the Numinous Tarot, which just has never clicked with me, and the Spirit Keeper's Vitruvian edition. Ditto. My vibe is so kind and chill. Thank you. How would I describe myself when I'm raging mad? Silent treatment, cold shoulder all the way. There's like nothing. I appreciate the irony that there's nothing more enraging when I'm mad at someone and they don't realize or acknowledge that I am in fact mad. So there's that. Any fiction I'm currently reading? Yes, I'm on the second of the 3 volumes of the Lady Astronaut series by Mary Robinette Kowal, and I'm looking forward to reading A Desolation Called Peace, which is a sequel to A Memory Called Empire by Arcady Martine. A Memory Called Empire was her first published book, I think. And I'm sort of perpetually rereading. I'm quite a rereader. And for several years, the go-to comfort reread has been the Ancillary series by Anne Leckie. Do I believe in aliens? I do in the abstract. Like the universe is an unimaginable, unconceivable, immense thing. So surely there are other living things and sentient and intelligent and technological, etc. In the sense of, do I believe in them on being on Earth? No. Unless they're so incredibly advanced that they can totally hide their presence, then at this point, I don't think that they're aliens on Earth. Have I ever been visited or seen a UFO? I have not. Have I ever experienced sleep paralysis? And no, I haven't. Do I remember my dreams, and do they have any common themes? And I remember them in fits and starts. I've never made an attempt to remember my dreams or to improve the retention. And I do have dreams that return a lot. Like I can't say, oh, this, and this scenario, but like when I wake up, I'm aware, or if I wake up in the middle of the dream and like in the middle of the night to use the bathroom and then get back in bed and go back to sleep, and I return to the same dream, I'm often aware that it's a theme or people or a situation that I've dreamt before. So there's a certain familiarity there that I do recognize. What do I do for a living? I'm the managing editor of a magazine published by a liberal religious denomination in the United States. Very liberal. If there was only one tarot deck in my collection, what would it be? It would be the Sasraibito. What's my favorite major and minor arcana card? And for the minor, I don't connect to the minors all that much, so I would probably say the Queen of Swords, which is kind of a card that I tend to use as a significator for myself. I'm Queen of Swords. But for the majors, it depends on the deck. And so in some decks, it would be the Devil. This is the, I should, even though it's distracting, I should pull up my camera so I can see if it's focusing. Yes, okay. So the Devil and the Sasraibito, totally my favorite card in that deck. But in the This Might Hurt, it's Temperance, which is like, the Devil and Temperance and the Hermit are the cards that I tend to gravitate towards in any deck, including the Smith versions of everything except the Devil. Here's another Devil from the Light Seers that I rather like. There's definitely a theme here of that's very personal about interpreting the Devil as being about temptation and attachment to something that one finds attractive. So those are really pretty, that's pretty particular to me. How many plants do I have? I have 18 house plants and somewhere between 4 and 6 pots outside that we'll see how many survive over the winter. My favorite nail polish color to wear, and it's one called Carbon, and this isn't going to show up because of the light, I guess, but it's a very intense kind of chromy silver metallic. I thought, oh, I should do my nails before I do this, but I just, I would rather do this video than futz around. What is a day in my life like? So I turn the alarm off at least once, sometimes several times. I love to laze in bed and check email. I check Facebook. I play some online games. I try not to work except for in the stated work hours. At lunchtime, I often will go for a walk. I use a post office box because I live right on a main street and there are lots of tourists in the summer. So it's about 1.5 miles to walk to the post office and back. And one of my favorite restaurants is near the post office, so I often will buy lunch. In the evenings, I cook or eat leftovers, probably more than half. Of course, that still leaves 3 nights a week, probably, when I get takeout or have something delivered. And in the evening, I tend to play games on the computer, Second Life, which I mentioned. I also play an MMO called Guild Wars with friends once a week, and then that's when I like look at tarot videos or make videos. Not today, but often. And I hang out with friends online. There are several different groups that I'm doing like Zoom parties with on a regular basis. If I could do anything in the world without thinking about money, what would it be? I would move to London. London, England. Just to be clear, since I do actually know there are more than one. What's the best general advice I could ever give someone? Take risks earlier rather than later. Let's pull up more questions. How old was I when I first read with tarot cards, and what was the name of that deck? I was around 20, 21. In college or soon after. It was the Rider-Waite-Smith with the plaid back. And then, I bought the first edition of Tarot for Yourself and spent some time doing that. Then there's like this long, long gap, decades, before I took it up again just about 2 years ago. What is my favorite smell? It's either lilac or sauteed garlic. I guess it depends on the context. If I could jump into and visit any one of the 78 tarot cards, which one would I choose and why? Temperance. Because that state of fluid balance is really attractive, and it's often depicted in a very beautiful natural setting, and kind of being in the presence of that divine. I mean, it's often an angel, but whether I believe in an angel or not, that kind of transcendent fluid balance feels just really attractive, and it would be nice to be in the presence of that. Does pineapple belong on pizza? No. What is one of the most memorable adventures I've ever been on? When I was 16, I spent a summer working on a dairy farm in the Netherlands. So I grew up in a very small town. We didn't travel a lot. We didn't take family vacations because of the way my father's work was. And so at 16, I'd been to the East Coast from California once with my mother and my sister. But, at 16, I went off on my own and flew across the country and had an orientation, and then flew with a group of people to Europe, and we had a 2 days orientation in Europe, in Luxembourg. It's been a long, long time ago. It was 1976. And then off I went on my own on public transportation to find my way to a little village in the Netherlands, where I proceeded to work for the summer and go to Amsterdam and other cities to meet up with other people on the program. And at the end of the summer, there was a 2-week, big bus. If it's Tuesday, it must be Brussels kind of trip. And it was, really formative for me. It helped to influence the choice of a dorm. When I went to college, I was studying genetics, but I asked to be placed in the International Studies dorm because I was really excited by that connection to the wider world. What tarot-related content creator have I been following on YouTube the longest? I think that's Kasha at Tarot Map. Do I meditate? If so, is meditation part of my daily routine? I sometimes meditate. Because of my former very active engagement as a Quaker, the sitting silently is very, very familiar and practiced for me. But I really don't have much of a daily practice. There aren't, aside from, personal hygiene and making a pot of tea in the morning, there aren't a lot of things that I do every single day in a structured way. It would be good if I did, but I don't. So, what countries have I been to? I think in sort of order. Mexico, Canada, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, France, Switzerland, Austria, Liechtenstein, United Kingdom, and Spain. So not really very widely distributed. But I feel so lucky to have been able to travel, and I look forward to being able to do it again someday. Arts and crafts, DIY hobbies, and what do I like to make? As I said, knitting, and I like to make lace shawls, which is funny because I don't wear them, and I also don't tend to sit under them at the couch. My temperature runs pretty warm, and I hardly ever need to have something over me like that. But I really love the pattern making of knitting lace, which is, if you're a knitter and you're afraid of lace, it's much easier than you would think. Am I a morning person, a night owl, or both? Neither. Right now I'm definitely a night owl. It's very easy for me to stay up late, and I don't like to wake up early. Although it hasn't always been that way. I remember times in my life when, when it was light outside, I would kind of bounce out of bed all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I'd actually like to return to that, because the morning light, where I'm situated in Provincetown, the morning light is really lovely and would be great to be out in, but it's not happening. What's my favorite kind of weather? Sunny. I don't like really hot weather because I'm a sweater. But aside from that, as long as it's sunny, I'm happy. If there's a side of wind, I enjoy wind. And that is it for the questions I've received. Thank you, everyone who participated by giving me questions. And I will have various links. When I review this, I'll figure out what links should be in the comments. Once again, I'm Kenneth. This is Common Hawthorne. Thank you for watching. And if you've made it this far, you've probably already subscribed and liked, or you certainly know the drill. Anyway, once again, thank you very much for coming and to watching all of this. Bye.